Okay. Uh, can can you hear us online? Yes. No. We cannot hear you. Can you
I
hear?
don't know if the messages go through, but I can hear you.
Can hear you. Okay, you can hear us. I cannot hear you. All right. So let's give it 5 minutes and then we'll start. Okay, let's start. I'm gonna stay near the podium so the people online can actually hear me. Is there any questions so far about what we're doing? No? Everything is clear? Okay. I think I mentioned this multiple times, and now I'm going to mention it one more time. If you feel the reason for not wanting to come to class in person, either for one session or more than one session, send me an email, let me know. Like other people who already did, and people, those who are actually online right now. So send me an email, let me know, and then if there is a need for it, I'm more than happy to accommodate it. Okay? Any question on that? No? All right. What about when is the winter break? Is it on November 24th, 23rd, something like that?
Yeah, it's the Wednesday before the last Thursday. I think it's like the 23rd. Hold on. No, it's the 24th, 25th, and 26th, which is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday of November.
Thursday, Friday?
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
So we're missing one session there, right? Right. Then after that, we kind of have 2 weeks to go, right?
Like that week.
Roughly, remaining 3 weeks to go. So I am thinking about spending 1 or 2 weeks after this session, spending 1 or 2 weeks on R, so we can wrap up what we want. My plan is for us to be at a point that we finish linear mixed models in R and the data visualization associated to that before that break. So I can release the final homework. We are still gonna have 2 more homeworks to go. Okay? So if we can do that for 2 weeks, I mean 4 sessions, do this, then it means that you're gonna have 1 hands-on session on base graphics with R, then at least 2 sessions on ggplot. One of them is roughly, or maybe 2 of them are going to be hands-on. Then we are going to have 2 or 3 sessions on linear mixed models. So that would put us roughly on 3 weeks-ish. Okay? We were looking for around something like 6 sessions. 3 weeks. So we might do that. So I might push for this Wednesday, we are going to finish the base graphics. Then next week, put the entire week for ggplot visualization in R. That would also allow us to release homework 3, which is focused on the differences between these two and how you can basically create something that the other one is creating. Then we can get back to the normal. But in that way, it's guaranteed that we only need like 1.5 weeks to get to linear mixed models and stuff. It's guaranteed that by mid-November, we are going to be done with linear mixed models. After that, all that is going to be left is only going to be theory. We are no longer after linear mixed models, we're done. And I'm only adding linear mixed models for 2 reasons. They are the most advanced, not the most advanced, but one of the very strong, or should not be here. They are one of the very strong statistical analysis methods. As a data scientist, this is the method that you want to know when you go for a job. Because majority of the stuff that you're going to do is going to be around this. You're going to do a little bit of clustering stuff. You're going to play around with data and so on, the same stuff that you're going to see with the base graphics, creating histograms, looking at the distributions and so on, doing simplistic statistical analysis, and then at the very end, this is the technique you're going to use. And there is a visualization component associated with it on how to talk about it, how to display the data, and so on. So that would also allow us to practice a little bit on reporting and how to talk about the data and how to talk about results. So that will be homework 4, and that will wrap up all of our homework, which means that after November 28th, I think, in November 25th or 6th, I can also release the final project, which is basically an R project using a data set that you're going to find. We're going to talk about that when we get there. And you're going to have 2 or 3 weeks to finish that. But it's going to be a time-consuming project to do. So you're going to need 2 weeks of things. That being said, if I were to do that, it would probably take me 1 afternoon, maybe less. Maybe 2 hours or 3 hours to talk about the data to do it. But I'm assuming that you guys are going to take your time and so on. So I think 2 or 3 weeks is going to be more than enough for you to finish your project. All that being said, you're going to be busy till the very last day of this class. If you haven't started on your homework 1, seriously, stop. This is not going to be done in 1 afternoon. Okay? This is going to take a long time for you to understand how Tableau works, find some data sets, and then do some hands-on exercises on that. And record yourself doing it and explaining it. And you cannot regenerate something that the tutorials already generated. I know those tutorials. I think I gave you the link to them. So, meaning that I know what they're talking about. So you need to go beyond that. You need to learn how to generate good visualization through Tableau. You need to find your data, and you need to show me that you can explain what you're doing. And then you also have to go and watch 3 presentations of your colleagues to help you better understand the stuff that you probably missed. Okay? So that is going to take a huge amount of chunk of time. I gave you all the time in the world that you can have for that. But if you wait till December, you're going to do very poorly on that. Okay? So if you haven't started, make sure you are done with that by mid-November. Okay? You need that last 2 weeks for your final projects. And at the same time, you're going to have exams. You're going to have other projects on other courses that you're going to have. So it's not like this is just the only thing you're going to do. Okay? All right. With that being said, let's see here. I try to move up too much. Okay, so we've got this student outreach. If you're interested, let me know. Here is a disclosure. Some of the information that you're going to see today, hopefully we finish today, are coming from Professor Tufts' website. We are also getting information from this book called Information Visualization Perception for Design from Colin Ware. There are also some other sources that we're using, and here and there you're going to see some links from that. So in some of the books, this is going through your textbook. We are focused on chapter 5 in envisioning information today. But in some other books and some other courses, for example, in this is Washington, if I remember correctly, this session is about maps, or at least they've got a session between color and map that now we're joining them together, because we cannot be only theoretical. We have to have half of our class spent on art, which they don't do that. So they are fully theoretical. We are not. We are half. So this is a mixture of the maps and the colors sections. So just so you know. Is there actually any question about your homework too? No? Does it make sense? Yes? Question number 1. So the question is, if you submit early, is it possible to get feedback before Thursday? Yes, if you've got it ready, send it to me. Your TA was supposed to be good to go by now. I've been looking what's happening with that mission. I did send an email in the weekend, but I haven't heard back. So I'm not sure why is this taking so long. But apparently they are doing background check and so on. So the moment that our TA is on board, then you have access to him, both on his office hours and tutorial hours and so on. You can practice with him, and you can check your answers with him to make sure that you can maximize your grades. That being said, for this one, I don't think it's going to be on board by Thursday. So just send it to me. You know the office hours. If needed, we can basically book an appointment for this week. Just send me some time slots that works for you, and I try to accommodate. And then we go through it together. Any questions? Yes.
I'm having a hard time finding like a specific description of homework 2 on campus. Is it possible to have one?
It's under the files.
It's in
On files, thank
So
you.
I'm kind of putting everything on files.
Gotcha, okay. Oh, I see.
Is that not
It took me a
normal?
bit to find it too.
How does other people?
Normally, they just put it on the homework posting, so
Oh,
I was real confused for a couple of minutes.
sorry.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. All right. I try to do it moving on. Okay. Any other questions? No? All right. Source of the data. Yeah, but you need to explain what is the data. Okay, so make sure the explanation is very important. Okay. But yeah, if there is a link to the source, that's all right. You don't need to submit the data. These days, there are some COVID-19 data sets that you can use. Maybe that's probably the best data you can use these days. Who knows? Maybe you found something interesting. So you can try those. But then, if you're working in your workplace, they are happy to give you the data. That's all right. If the data cannot be shared, but you can show me your work, that's going to be all right. You don't need to provide the link to the data, but you need to demo it to me in that case. Okay. Otherwise, I can get your code and get your report and get the links and run it myself. And if there is something wrong, then we can have a demo time together. Make sense? Okay. Any more questions? No question here. Okay. So let's move on. So we want to talk about color perception today and the importance of color. So in representing and communicating information, we get benefited from colors great dominion. Human eyes are sensitive to color variations. A trained colorist can basically distinguish among 1 million different colors. That is when tested under contrived conditions of fair loss comparison. So 20,000 colors are accessible to many viewers with constraints for practical applications set by the early limits of human visual memory, rather than the capacity of discriminating locally among adjacent things. Tiny color to information is elementary. To paint well is simply this, to put the right color in the right place. This is coming from Paul Klee. You're going to refer to him a couple of times today. So identifying the right color for the right component in the scene is a complex procedure. The first principle in bringing color to information is this: above all, we should not do any harm. Okay? So let's take a look at some visualizations that are primarily delivering information through colors and see what can be done. So can someone in the class tell me what they think about this visualization?
Busy.
Kind of sucks.
Good.
Like something you see on the crossbar of a ski lift as you're going up a mountain.
Okay.
Also, if it's a map of where you are, it's kind of impossible to tell where you are.
All right. What else?
I think they used like bluish whitish to dictate it being like snow. It's higher in elevation, so like I think the higher up you are, the bluer it is, the lower you are, the greener it is. But I'm not sure.
Kind of looks like a topographical map, but they tried to put in the features too instead of just showing the topography and the lines. So it's impossible to tell what's steep and what's not.
The text is really hard to read with the color choice, all the lines especially.
You guys are so used to Google Maps these days, that you're so used to it that you're no longer able to admire this. This is the Swiss mountain map. This is a standard of excellence for serious information display. This is a 2D data representation that provides a 3D visual representation. Every pixel in there speaks for itself. Okay? So specifically, if you want to talk about this, it's all about content. It has high resolution, vigorous expression of third dimension, local details always embedded in large context, use of appropriate light color to avoid optical clutter, realistic content-driven colors, a smart, graceful typography done by various typographers. So some of the features in it is the size of type proportional to size of object label. So type is quantified in here. Intense quantitative data by means of contour lines. Then in here, contours is equal to the spark lines that flow in 3 dimensions. Thorough natural integration of words, numbers, and depictions. Shows intense local data information in position without annoying pop-ups. There are 0 chart jumps in here. This is incredible. This is a crazy, busy visualization. And chart jump is a killer in data visualization. They're gonna get to it in a couple of weeks. And you're gonna see what is the chart on. And this one has no chart on. Every pixel there represents an important information. So there's no pixel that you can get out that the conveyed message can be the same. So all pixels carry content. Many exact numbers provided. So labels for control lines and height of mountain peaks. It avoids the quantification found in much data visualization stuff. It's all about content. And then it's open source, no proprietary formats. It's driven by content, a spirit of public service, pride in the forward craft of photography, not driven by marketplace ethics, not driven by focus groups, and so on. But here's an explanation about these maps coming from Ingrid Rockery in her lecture about teaching to see. This is coming from ProTop's website, and you can see the link there.
Good survey maps integrate multiple layers of data.
Can everybody online hear this? Or you cannot hear it? Let's go back to it.
Good survey maps integrate multiple layers of detailed information. They use color intelligently,
When you see the
balancing
motion,
between
you
hue,
feel the
gray
change
value,
because of the
and
motion of the data. This
brightness.
is just 2D. But the moment you
Different
move
types
right on
of
it,
information live together without harming each other. Detail type and symbols survive because the landscape features are kept very light. Bad maps have a dominance of bright colors and simply get noisy. Typographic details get lost in meaningless dark shading of the building. It's astonishing how sensitive our eyes are in distinguishing the most subtle variation in color. Gradual value changes are used to show variations of height or type of terrain. The color of the glacier, this typical bluish cast, is very close to reality. So is the landscape. Even the type and symbols are layered by different size and weight to indicate their
So when you look at it and move your head around it and move your eyes on it, it becomes alive. And then you can better see the importance of different lines, different contours, different pixel colors, representing the depth and the altitudes and the differences. This is not a map for driving from point A to point B. For that map, you only need the information on the yellow road grid. But this is the map that carries so much more information for you. So in here, the color labels by basically distinguishing water from stone and glacier from field. Measure by indicating altitude with contour and rate of change by darkening. Initiates reality with river blues and and shadow hatches, and visually enlivens the topography quite beyond what could be done in black and white color. This Swiss map is basically excellent because it's governed by good ideas and executed with superb craft. Ideas not only guide work, but also help defend our designs by providing reasons for choices against arbitrary taste preferences. So what you see in here are the fundamental uses of color in information design, which is to label, to measure, to represent, and to limit. The strategies for how color can serve information are basically set out in Edward Imhoff's classic categorical relief presentation book, which basically describes the design practices for the Swiss maps. So he came up with certain rules, and we are going to cover these rules today. So the principles to minimize color damages are these. First of all, pure, bright, or very strong colors have loud, unbearable effects, especially when they are used unrelieved over large areas adjacent to each other. This is what's called a strong color rule. The second rule is what's called light color rule. The placing of light, bright colors mixed with white next to each other usually produces unpleasant results, especially when painting large areas. Along with its critics of color clutter, Imhoff's first rule basically contains an important constructive idea. The color spots against a light gray or muted field highlight and italicize data and also help to wave an overall harmony. Now here is an example of what would happen if you do not respect these two rules. This will happen. This is a clear example of bad visualization caused by ignoring these rules. The two rules that we just discussed were, first of all, a strong color rule, and second of all, light color rule. This is a map representing primary home heating fuel by counties of the United States between 1950, 60, and 70. All this is strong color, especially the surrounding blue. There is a strong poppy white band, make it the map's dominant visual statement with some alarming shapes at the lower left. These colors are dark in value, and inevitably, we have a significant 1+1=3 effects. The visual war with heavily encoded information. Let's see another example. Here's another one. This is an example from Joseph Albers in his I think it was book, The Interaction of Color. So one thing to note is the after image and vibration resulting from these strong colors that you see in here that are placed on top of each other. Now let's see some very interesting visualization. I'd like to show you another video from Pixelpop's website, where sound, objects, shapes, and colors are mixed to provide a powerful animation visualization. This is basically one of the best data visualization around. What do you think?
Cool way to visualize music as it's playing.
Very different, right? I'm using these examples exclusively because you are not used to it. You're all used to think the way you usually think. But something like this is cool. It ain't. It has a lot of chalk junk there. Not supposed to be there. And this is just one of the good visualizations. I see very interesting work coming from some of the students, and I might actually share some of these in the future. I have to get permission from them to share a graph or a picture on an unpublished data. But their thing is perfect, realistically it isn't. And they don't realize it isn't until you point it out one by one. So something that I want you guys to get used to is the word chart jump. There are lots of information you put in the chart, in the graph, in the presentation that don't carry any information. Having them or not having them has no impact on the message that you want to convey. They just make the chart clutter. They might look nice, but looking nice is not the primary goal of a data visualization. You want to convey a message. That's the most important thing. To be able to present what is in your mind through a chart. So whoever look at it without killing his or herself over investigating every inch of that chart can actually just have a look and realize what you want to say before you even say it. Now, if you are writing a paper, writing an article, making a presentation or something, then the things become a little bit more complex because now you cannot keep changing the color codings in your presentations. You cannot change the styles in your presentation. You have to start with a single style and you have to finish with that style. So that when they, in the beginning of your presentation, they learn what you mean with certain boxes, with certain colors, with certain font sizes, then they can just carry on that learning to the next job, to the next job, to the next job. As a scientist, it's your responsibility to make people understand what you want to say. It's not their responsibility to figure out. They're not stupid because they cannot figure out what the heck you're saying. It's just you're enabled to make them understand. That's what's happening. Okay? So it's a very unusual thing that you guys are not trained on it yet. Okay? So moving on, every day that you're watching something, watching a movie, looking at the billboard, looking at the newspaper, reading an article, or sitting in a class, watching some slides and so on. Look for these things. See what are the stuff that could be deleted from that scene and nothing happens. If you can get rid of something and that thing doesn't have any impact on the message that you're supposed to receive, then having them or not having them really doesn't matter. If I can get rid of some color coding from a picture and the overall message is still going to be the same, there is no need for those colors to be there. Okay? You're just going to become distracted, and you're just going to come back and say there is a difference between this box and this box. No, there isn't. Just because the color is different, it doesn't mean that they are different. Or at least that wasn't the intention of the person who was presenting this video. He just didn't realize it. This is what is happening with my student. He is putting like a rainbow for me. Except that these colors have no meaning. Has absolutely zero meaning. But then it creates some meaning that are not supposed to be there. Okay? Does that make sense? So in that music stuff that you just saw, there isn't a single pixel that you can get out of there and wouldn't change something. Every box, every object that you saw there has a meaning that represents something. They use different colors, different boxes to convey different messages. The motion that was in those cylinders that goes from outside to inside was very different from the motion from the one that goes from inside to outside, or the one that would just pop up. But the sound was also different. And the sound of the other instruments that were added to the music had been carried out by different shapes with different sizes that represent for how many milliseconds you're going to hear those stuff. Right? So you could look at those sequence of objects coming on the screen without doing any music, but it could basically create some sort of expectation for you, and when it reached there, the sound complete that expectation to you, so tell you what you already know. That is, there's going to be a high note, there's going to be a different note, there's going to come down, and then it's going to go up, and something unusual is going to happen in here. You've never seen this, but next time when you see something like this, we know what's going to happen. Right? Now, if you are a musician, you're going to be able to better relate to this job or to this presentation. Now you can easily understand what's coming out next. But if you're not a musician, then you still don't get lost in the whole thing. Make sense? Okay. So there are a variety of color systems, but there is always 3 dimensions there. In all color organizations, every color is located in 3 spaces, described by hue, saturation, and value in Munsell and other special perceptual classification. By red, green, and blue components in various additive methods for video displays, and by cyan, magenta, and yellow components in subtractive methods for printing inks. Sometimes scientists or data analysts approaches data with no particular theory. So they've got no idea what they want to test. They just have some data and they want to figure out what it says. The goal is to explore the data for meaningful and useful information in a mess of mostly meaningless numbers. Plotting techniques have long been the tools of the data explorer. So in essence, the process is to plot the data, look for a pattern, and then interpret the findings. So the critical step in the discovery process is an act of perception. Now, problem can arise in exploring data when more than 2 dimensions of the data are to be displayed. It's It's possible to extend the scatter plot to 3 dimensions using some techniques, such as stereoscope displays and so on. But what we do, the problem is going to be, what do we do about the data with more than 3 dimensions? So we can convert the 2D to 3D somehow. But what if it is 10D? What if it is 4D, 5D, 6D? One solution for multidimensional data display is what was proposed by Chambers and his colleagues. And it's referred to as generalized drafter's plot. So we're going to see an example of this in a second. Now the that is going to arise is, can colors inherently multidimensional quality be used to express multidimensional information? So can the color represent the different dimensions of the data? Can viewers understand or learn to understand such displays? A good place to start on a video display terminal is to spread data points over flat land for 2 dimensions, and then light up each point by red, green, and blue or RGB components in proportion to values taken by 3 additional variables. And if you do that, then you can go from the visualization like in A to something to C. So in this technique, all pairs of variables are used to create 2-dimensional scatter plots. Although the generalized grapher plots can often be useful, it usually suffers from a disadvantage. It's very difficult to see data patterns that are present only when 3 or more data dimensions are taken into account. So what you're seeing here is 5-dimensional data presentation. In A, we've got a generalized graphless plot without color dimensions mapping into it. In B, we've got a scatter plot with color dimension mapping that allows us to extend the dimension of data representation to 5 or 6 dimensions in here. And in C, we've got a generalized graphless plot with color dimension mapping. Now let's go back to the rules to minimize color damage. So we go through the first 2 rules, which was the dark color and light color rules. Now, sorry, strong color and light color rules. Now we're going to go through the next 2 rules. So the third rule is background color rule. Large area of background or base colors should do their work most quietly, allowing the smaller, bright areas to stand out most vividly. If the former are muted, grayish or neutral, then this is going to be the best way to go with it. So for this very good reason, gray is regarded in painting to be one of the prettiest, most important, and most versatile of colors. The strongly muted colors mixed with gray provide the best background for the color theme. And this philosophy also applies equally to map designs. Now, the fourth rule is theme color rule. If a picture is composed of 2 or more large enclosed areas in different colors, then the picture will fall apart. All colors of the main thing should be scattered like islands in the background color. The complex nature of the Earth's surface leads to enclosed colored areas all over the map. Now let's take a look at what we just talked about and see how does this can be shown on a map visualization. So color basically brings you information more than just codes, naming visual nouns. Color is a natural quantifier. It perceptually continues the span of incredible fitness of fineness of distinction. So what you're seeing here is what is called the general mathematic chart of the ocean records, which basically have information about the ocean depth and the land height in 21 steps. So the deeper or higher, the darker is a policy using here. So this basically is used as a visual metaphor for color. What we see here is the Great Ocean and the trenches of Western Pacific and Japan Sea. Number counters outline color fields, improving accuracy of reading here. We have nearly transparent gray tracks on visual plane apart from the mathematic things. And trace paths of surrounding lines. Every color mark on this map signals 4 different variables. The first one is latitude, the second one is longitude, then we've got the sea or land information coming out of that color mark, and then the last thing that we get out of it is the depth or altitude measured in meters. So by just using different color codings for each pixel, they could convey message about these 4 important information. Now, stepping away from some maps, we can look at colors and their effects in general, in more general terms. So, in the ocean map we saw, the quantities are basically shown by a value scale, progressing from light to dark blue. So although this is going to be easy to learn and remember, the value scales may be vulnerable to the inaccuracies of reading provoked by disturbing contextual effects, which is what you're basically seeing here. On the in here, the edge is basically floating and simultaneous, and you're going to see simultaneous constants in here. So a widely used alternate is to use a scale of rainbow colors, replacing the clear visual sequence of light to dark with the disorderly red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and indigo and violet, which is an encoding that now and then reduces triplex viewers to mumbling color names and the numbers they represent. This is in contrast to what Paul Valery says. He says to see is to forget the name of the thing that one sees. So despite being experienced with color spectrum in scientific textbooks and rainbows, the mind's eye does not readily give an order to this ROYGBID sort of colors. They stand for ROYGB, and it's an acronym for this sequence of hue that you see in the rainbow, like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and white. So any color quantity, whether based on variations in hue, value, or saturation, is potentially sensitive to interactive contextual effects. These perceived color shifts, while an infrequent threat to accuracy of reading in day-to-day information design, are basically surprising and vivid, suggesting that color differences should not be relied upon as the sole method for sending a message in visualization. Now, let's see how can we confuse people with just contrasting colors? What would be the effect when we put these different colors on top of each other? We've got two examples in here of something like that. So we've got the same color in the central squaring here, and it's going to look quite different when placed in a slightly different circumstances. The small squares are basically shifted so as to match the opposite surrounding of which is basically a very fine visual touch in here. So perhaps the more stunning are the arrangements of color fields that make two different colors look alike. Here's another one. So the actual color of these two square boxes against a plain white background is what you are seeing down here. This picture is a little bit low quality, so I apologize for that. But this is what Albert is saying about this. It says repeated experiments with adjacent colors will show that any ground subtracts its own hue from colors which it carries, and therefore influences. Now you can see some effect on some daily graphics that you see. The question is this: can these interactions of color benefit information displays? And the answer to that obviously is that is not at all. But in this conventional roadmap, the perceived visual palette used flow labels is extended without the expense of printing an additional flat color. So the thin red line, which is a smaller rows, changes to deeper red, then flanked by parallel blue, with the parallel blue strips in the code for larger rows. Color itself is subtle and exacting, and the process of translating perceived colors, color marks on paper into quantitative data resides in the viewer mind. So these translations are going to be nonlinear, often noisy, and idiosyncratic, which plenty of differences in perception found among viewers. So what is needed for transparent and effective deployment of redundant signals is two things. First, the need and ambiguity or confusion in seeing a data display that can in fact be diminished by multiplicity. And the second is appropriate choice of design techniques that will work to minimize the ambiguity of reading. So if you disregard these conspicuous distinctions, then it is going to result in propagate of gratuitous multiplicity. So the ocean map that we saw exemplifies a sensitive multiplicity. The color fields which encode depth are in turn delineated by counters labeled with depth measurements. So these lines eliminate edge blocking and make each field a more coherent whole, minimizing within field visual variation and maximizing between field differences. So the edge lines allow very fine value distinction, increasing scale precision. Between fields, only the presence of an edge is needed. A thin line of color not too distant in value from the scale itself. Note that dramatic effect of the counter here, which is visually shifting the color within the outline hole, sharply distinguishing the building from the surrounding ground. So this technique of cartography and graphic design is confirmed by theories of vision, which points out that human cognitive processing gives considerable and often decisive weight to counter information. So in this map, the color merely delineates what is already obvious. Laid down in broad, unrefined bands, the strong colors induce a loss of focus of detail on the entire map, making it something to be read only at posted distance. So there are so much visual excitement in here. There are so little data, many to often a shape already familiar to most viewers of the map. Boundary lines should be drawn so as to show clearly what falls on which side. There are essential details that are lost in here in color crossing hatching, and the color basically misses the point. The map at the right is an unsuccessful imitation of the original map that you're seeing here on the left. So outer areas are given less emphasis with the color gently defining roads, boundaries, and cities. City symbols are marked by red stars, indicating how many members each place sent to Parliament in 1724. At any rate, a clear statement about geography rather than a statement about color. So we're going to finish up with some hints about how to use the colors in our presentations and data visualization. So the first hint is to use as few colors as possible. Pushing so much color on your graphics is not really a good idea. You can always remember this as an example. In the beginning, it might actually look quite interesting, right? It's a pretty map, except that it misses in almost everything. You cannot read those. Text colors. It's very difficult to read them now. It's not clear what is the boundary. It's not clear how the information changes from one line to the next line. And it basically misses on everything, especially if you already saw this one. So, less color you have is likely to better represent the information that you want. The colors should be distinctive and named. You should go after color harmony, natural colors. Okay. use cultural conventions, appropriate symbols. So if you are creating something for example, audience in United States, and you're creating, let's say, a map, then you obviously want to use the color codes that are your audience familiar with. So if your audience are familiar with roads being presented in yellow color, then you're not supposed to go and use a black color for that. If the highways are supposed to be used to be shown by, for example, orange color, you don't get to go and create those with blue. But then they expect that to be a river, right? So respect the cultural conventions, and know your audience, know for whom you are creating this. And be careful with bad interactions, like red over blue. That's not what you want. That's not a way to convey message. That's just a way to piss off people and make sure that they never use that visualization ever. Right? The best approach to move is to make sure that the white versus black would work well. So if you just go with the black and white version of it, you can actually see all the information. Especially in scientific reporting, this is very important. Instead of trying to create graphs with lots of colors and feel like, oh, this is very pretty, the prettiness is really not important. What is important is that you can print that damn thing in black and white. And every line, every pixel of that, you are providing your original graph is still there. There are two reasons for that. The first reason is majority of people who are going to read this by printing it, if they're printing it, don't have a color printer. And if they do, they don't want to base their colors on your graph. Right? They usually want to go with the lower resolution printing, so they use minimal ink and maximize the number of pages that they can print. With that spirit, you need to create something that can withstand the test of black and white. Okay? Oh, and there are lots of people that are colorblind. Some of my close friends were colorblind, and I never knew until they actually told me 2 years ago. And I knew them for 30 years. So,
I think it's like 1 in every 12 males is colorblind.
Yeah. So
It's a lot.
it's an important thing. If you can create something that can facilitate these two, the last two items, you are almost okay on the rest of them. Okay? But if you create something that use some very contrasting colors, like red over blue, or some colors that are very, very close to each other, like, for example, let's say you're looking at this, and you're creating something like something between this color and whatever color exists between these two colors. Okay? If you're creating something with colors that are very close to each other, you're failing. If you're creating something that are 100% opposite to each other, like red over blue, you're failing there. Okay? So you just follow these 7 hints in here, you're likely to create something that can be read and understood with lots of people. Now, always remember something. Just because you've got free space in a chart or in a visualization doesn't mean that you have to put something there. If you can get rid of something from your screen, from your visualization, and doesn't change anything, it still conveys the same message, that thing should not be there. Okay? You're going to see some more examples of these, but just so you know how important these teachings of Professor Top are, when you work in R, there are actually some packages that print your graphs following these visualization guidelines, and they look very different. We're going to see some example of this in the R sessions. Did you see that, for example, you can get rid of the axes and nothing happens. All you're interested in is a histogram that shows if the data is normally distributed or not. Why do you need axes? What does it matter? How high is it? How high is it? Or how wide is it? That's not what you're after. You're after the shape of it. If you know the middle, and if you can convey this information in terms of if it is biased toward the left or the right, if it is skewed or not, you're done. The rest of it are just chart charts. It might be conventional to have them, but that doesn't necessarily add to your graphics. And if you want to follow Professor Top's principles, they should not be there. Later on, when you see these charts next to each other, you will see how different this approach is. And you will see how easier it is to understand what is it that graphics is basically presenting. Okay, so if you follow these principles, the best way to describe it is that it's much more probable that you can give the exact message to your audience that you intend, rather than them getting a message that you didn't intend to give them, just because they're coming with a different background on what they expect to see or how they expect to see it. Okay? Make sense? Any questions? Ready to go and create some pretty charts? All right. Look for chart jumps. Look for information in daily graphical displays that you feel like doesn't convey any messages. Okay? Start training your brain and start training your eyes over these sort of things. Later on, when we go through the chart charts, when we go through the different, more advanced aspects of the theory of this, we're going to see a lot of examples about how removing them can change what you see. Okay, thanks a lot. Have a great day. See you on Wednesday.